Galen and I co-convened the Extremism in Gaming Research Network. I'm sorry if you've heard this presentation before, it might sound familiar, but essentially we are a network, maybe I should go on to the next one. So we are a network of practitioners, of academics, of policymakers, of security professionals, industry representatives, and we are looking at sort of the nexus of extremism in the online gaming space. We've been 3 years going now, sort of building up the people that we've been working with, building up an understanding of this space, of what's needed, of what's useful. Certainly it's bordering the sort of discussion of social media, but it is different. The gaming space does present some unique challenges and opportunities, I think, to address this nexus of violent extremism in the online space. I perhaps will go back and just say, so this title, I don't have a cool QR code because I'm also old and am not so good with QR codes. But this is the name of a report that we published, and we are good partners with GNet, who published this report for us, and GiftCT is on our steering board. So if you want to look up, this is the name of the report. It's on GNet's website, but it's basically, I would say, a compilation of sort of a lot of the work that's being done across members of the network. So certainly Galen and I won't claim all of that knowledge. We wrote the reports, but it's really showcases what different members across the network are doing. For those who are perhaps less familiar with gaming, a brief sort of synopsis, I guess, of this space. It is actually the most profitable of the entertainment sector now. There are 3 billion gamers in the world. The number is only growing. COVID saw a spike in numbers as people couldn't go outside. They often went online. I play online Mario Kart with my sisters who live halfway across the world. It's a space for entertainment. It's a space for community, and it's a very profitable space. It's not niche anymore. There, sort of as a perception, I think that the white Western male gamer is the gamer, right? But that's not true. There's sort of 50% of the space represents women, different gender identities. There are, the highest growing populations of gamers are other places in the world. It's a very global phenomenon and a very diverse phenomenon, which does then lead to some challenges of extremism and sort of hate-based discrimination in gaming spaces. Certainly, we emphasize as a network that gaming is overall a very beneficial space, right? A lot of people find in gaming, they find communities, they find a way to express themselves, they find identity, they find very positive effects. That being said, because we all in this room love to spend our days talking about the horrors of the world, there is obviously a problem also in the gaming space with extremism and with hate-based discrimination that can then encourage people into extremism or into violent extremism. And we have seen evidence with some attackers, that they have referenced their gaming history, their gaming communities, their gaming culture, references that they bring to their, advertise with their attacks. But we are not rehashing this argument from the 90s. There is no causative link between gaming and violence. Playing violent video games does not necessarily make you violent, but there are a lot of nuances we can explore around that, which we won't have time to explore today, but if you want to read the report, it does start on it. One thing I will say that we're working on is sort of gaming as social spaces, and we're doing a project right now. Several members of the EGRN are working on a project right now looking at the transnational nature of those social spaces. So we play with people from all over the world. If you go into an online multiplayer game, there might be somebody there from a different country, a different cultural representation, a different language representation, and sort of looking at the nuances of how those interactions can either maybe amplify hate, can reduce hate, can increase resilience or vulnerability. That's something that's really an interesting dynamic that we're looking at now. So there'll be further research forthcoming on that here in the next 6 months. 6 months to a year we'll be publishing on that. I'll hand it over to Galen to sort of we'll talk more about the threat picture now.
So having teed up that gaming is not inherently a problem, there are problems inside of online video game communities and sub-communities. Among these are, in the US and the EU, exposure to white supremacist and far-right ideologies. This is polling from some of our partners at the Anti-Defamation League in the US. Exposure to white supremacist ideology among gamers has increased substantially year on year. In 2021, around 8% of adult gamers have been exposed to white supremacist ideologies. That rose to 20% in 2022. 2023 data is coming out shortly, and it will show an increase once again. That's also true for folks who are younger. 15% of young gamers ages 10 to 17 have been exposed to white supremacist ideologies in 2022. Hate and harassment, identity-based targeting and targeted hatred among gamers has also increased drastically year on year. This comes across the wider context of increasing white supremacy, anti-Semitic, misogynistic, and hate-based attacks across the EU and the US. This is not unique to games, right? But games and the communities inside of them are not isolated from broader societal trends, and they amplify certain elements of that. This is true across a variety of ideologies. This is from polling from UNOCT with Linda Schlegel and Amar Singham. This is simply to say that the type of extremist content is not relegated solely to white supremacist or far right. Rather, this occurs across a number of different extremist ideologies and ideological groups. And it's true across the world. So one of our colleagues at the NYU Stern School, I think this was a 5-country poll that they did earlier in the year. And they found that there's a variety of support for extremist organizations present across the world and gaming communities, and statements that are either targeting individual racial, ethnic, gender, or religious groups are relatively widespread. As Jessica mentioned a minute ago, we have polling coming out in the coming 6 months to a year across 7 countries that looks at this in more depth, along with the socialization that occurs in gaming spaces. We have a typology of harms that a number of our members have developed over the years that breaks down the extremist use of gaming-related content as well as the social spaces around games into kind of 6 general categories. And if you come away from this with nothing else, I'd like you to think of online games as social spaces, right? These are not areas that are simply single-player games. They're not things that you engage in as an individual. They are complex social ecosystems and environments, kind of more like a stadium, right? You might come to watch a game, but you also engage with the players in the stadium. It's not just the players on the field. If you're looking at the sports metaphor, it's also everyone in the stadium around that. If you look at esports, it's not just the people playing the game, it's the millions of live streamers who are watching that in real time and engaging. It's also the forums around that. It's also the broader gaming companies that like to sell a lot of add-on products and sales. So in this typology, we see the creation of new video games and modifications or mods by extremist organizations. These include first-person shooters developed by Hezbollah, ranging to white supremacist and neo-Nazi mods dating back from the late 90s up to present day. We have a pretty good archive of that going that we'll be putting out sometime in the next year or two. There's also the use of gaming culture references. Games are pop culture now, right? If you are interested in reaching a young audience, you should probably be thinking about engaging with gaming, right? So if you want to reach pop culture salience in the type of propaganda you're putting out, you might use iconography from games. You might use direct game content. Our colleague Ashton likes to look at the use of Viking, Assassin's Creed's Viking, and a number of God of War games that are repurposed by white supremacist groups in their actual propaganda videos. ISIS somewhat famously reused Grand Theft Auto and a Grand Theft Auto mod for a lot of their propaganda videos. People thought ISIS made a game. They didn't. They literally just took a mod and made a video with it. Savvy use, cheap. Games for communication. Most games feature in-game chats as well as broader communication forums around them. You can also take game-like elements and use those elsewhere for radicalization purposes, things like leaderboards or ranking systems. And you can use the broader ecosystem of gaming platforms, things that are designed originally for gamers like Discord, which now, of course, is used by countless millions who play games and who don't, for communication, for recruitment, for mobilization. And lastly, we see the potential for financing and money laundering through video game platforms. As Jess mentioned a minute ago, gaming is phenomenally profitable. There's also enormous financial flows that go through gaming platforms. In-game item sales, game keys can actually be easily made untraceable and easily laundered. Yet there's very little research into this. So we're not sure, but there appears to be at least the potential to engage in terrorism-related fundraising and financing. Let's take a quick look. I love to go more in depth with photos. We'll do just like a quick little overview of one attack and how that plays out with gaming. The Buffalo attack is kind of an interesting one to look at because the perpetrator was an avid gamer. A quote from him was that I wouldn't be quite as nationalist today if I didn't enjoy playing Blood and Iron so much on Roblox. You wouldn't think of Roblox as being necessarily a place where people get radicalized. It's a service where primarily younger users play mini games designed by other kids. However, there are a wide variety of racist, white supremacist, misogynistic, and other content that you can find there quite easily. He also used gaming-adjacent platforms like Discord to organize his to-do list, to buy all the things he wanted to help to draft his manifesto, and to find a broader community that were the first ones to watch the perpetration of the attack on Twitch, where he live streamed it. Twitch is a service popular with gamers, primarily for live streaming games, though there's many other live streams on there now. In fairness to Twitch, they caught the perpetration very quickly and shut down the stream after just around a little over 2 minutes. But in that time, the followers that he brought from his wider community, many of which came from either Chan communities or gamer communities that he were a part of, recorded and re-uploaded that initial video. Then that went around the world very swiftly. The types of iconography used in the actual video of that act of terror included direct gaming references. It's shot from the point of a helmet cam, echoing first-person shooters. There's Easter eggs for people to find, symbols inscribed on the side of the AR-15, individual things that the viewer is meant to find to allow them to explore other adjacent content. In this case, references to the manifesto and references to future acts of terror that the individual would like to see committed. Those then circulated back around. Games were recreated in Roblox to emulate the actual act of terror. Next to that, you saw leaderboards created on far-right sites that were designed to rank that particular incident alongside other incidents. What did you like about that particular moment of terror? What did you like about that particular atrocity? What didn't you like? This is a form of audience targeting, trying to understand the user community to better design future attacks. And that's happening in a gamified environment. At the same time, you saw the use of that in future attacks today. So the Jacksonville shooting that occurred last month had the same Easter egg items brought to the side of the AR-15 that were taken from the Buffalo attacker. You saw a similar radicalization and an attempt to live stream that attack as well. So you see the use both of specific tactics as well as a broader schema taken from gaming-like references being used by extremist attackers that's perpetuated inside of gaming-related environments. I can talk a lot more about it, but I'm going to stop there. Pass back to what we can do that's good, because there's a lot of interesting mitigation points. Back to you.
I'll try and be quick for the sake of time. But I think that it's useful to sort of end this conversation right now. Of course, we're happy to answer questions, but there are efforts happening that I think we need to acknowledge. And this sort of probably goes to what you were talking about, Bibi, with the sort of the question of illegal versus gray content. So trust and safety teams are present in a lot of social media and gaming companies now, and are the ones trying to navigate this issue of how to moderate, what to base their moderation on, what precedents do they use, do they just stick to the law, do they moderate hate-based discrimination? Those types of issues are really complex. Often small teams working on it in large companies with large user bases. And so that's sort of, there's trust and safety efforts, and part of our network is trying to help build the capacity of these trust and safety teams to help help them understand sort of the extremism space, the different ideologies present, the different ways in which the gray or questionable content can contribute to people's pathways to radicalization. There's also what we call safety by design efforts in the gaming space, and this is where there are networks adjacent to ours as well as ours that are working towards helping game designers understand how to build games in a way that makes them more resistant to illicit behaviors or more resistant to exploitation by extremists. So like our colleague Ashton raising the issue of the narrative storyline of the game and how it could be exploited by white supremacists, that's something that a game designer who is a computer coder might not be thinking about, right? It's something that they wouldn't even, it's not in their day-to-day thinking. So having outside advice on these sort of ways in which the games can be exploited can actually help the designers build them in a way that is more resistant to that kind of exploitation. Also, I think it's worth saying that there are efforts happening now already, and efforts that are growing, I think, in prevalence and popularity to use games as a PCVE modality, right? To actually conduct preventing and countering violent extremism programming in the game. There are games being designed, there are efforts that include offline and offline interventions that are now using games as pieces of their programs. So that it's certainly becoming more prominent, I think, in the preventing and countering violent extremism space to think about how to use games. The education sector has a long history of using games to help kids learn, and it's sort of the same principle of making PCVE more engaging by gamifying it, by making it more engaging, perhaps. And then there's also sort of this there's actual efforts to play games. So an example, we have colleagues in the network that are police departments, part of police departments that are using esports to reach not at risk, but perhaps communities that they have a less positive relationship with, and they use the esports so they can just play the game with them. They're literally just getting online and playing together as a way of building trust, or as a way of implementing sort of a mentorship with that community. And that then helps to have that bond of trust later on if they need that community to come and tell them if there's a problem, or if there's an issue of violent extremism in the community. So it's almost using games as a mode with which to engage and sort of using it to reach people that you perhaps wouldn't be able to reach in your other ways of working. Ultimately, I think we'll end with this. This is sort of just about our network. We're trying to convene the right people, so feel free to come and join us. We're doing the research. We are working on these types of PCV interventions, and then training for both, for governments, for the companies, for a lot of different people. So these are the things that we're working on. And I do have a QR code here.
Was one.
Yes, this is for the network if you want more information. All right.